Good morning, everyone. I'm not exactly sure what went wrong, but the Zoom wasn't working for the past 24 hours and it's still acting strange. I'd like to thank Moshe Snitsky all the way from Holland for trying to sort it out. And I hope that this share comes up clearly. I would also like to apologize that there was no share yesterday due to the fact that I came in late, and by then I worked out the computer wasn't how I wasn't able to sort out the computer, so it took time. I do know this week is a bit not Sudan organized due to the fact that all my children are Baruch Hashem. Well, hopefully by the end of this week it'll all be Mitzvah Hashem finished and everything should be back to normal. We're up to the Mishnah on Daf Chav Zayin and Aleph. And today we're going to learn about Rabbi Lezer, the Tana of Rabbi Lezer, who, by the way, was the Rebbe of Rabbi Akiva. And first we're going to learn some of his interesting halachas regarding Succca, and then a bit about his life. Let's see how much we can do. Says the Mishnah of Zayin Amud Aleph, 5 lines from the top. Rabbi Lezer Oimer, Beis says Succca. A person has to eat over Succca's 14 meals. One in the day, one in the night. There's no fixed amount, only the first night. In all the chidushim of Rabbi Lezer, which we're going to learn over the course of today, we do not pass like a single one of them. And the halacha follows like the chachamim, that you do never have to eat in the sukkah if a person chooses to fast, if a person chooses to eat potatoes or fruit, and therefore a person does not mechuyev ever of sukkahs where a person is mechuyev to eat in the sukkah. Taisus asks the question, how can you say that you're not mechuyev to eat in the sukkah? The halacha is sukkahs last for 7 days, of which one of them will definitely be a Shabbos, and you've also got the days of Yom Tov, and on Yom Tov there's a mitzvah to wash, to have a meal. And since if you're going to wash, you have to eat it in the sukkah, it comes out that yes, you do have to eat in the sukkah. How can the Chacham say you don't eat it in the sukkah? Yes, you do eat it in the sukkah. It is true that on Chol HaMoed you can eat potatoes and not have to eat it in the sukkah. But on Yom Tov and on Shabbos, you have to eat a meal, and that meal has to take place in the sukkah. Answers Taisus that it is true that you have to eat a meal because of Yom Tov or because it's Shabbos, but you don't have to eat a meal because it's sukkahs. So what difference does that make? The difference is as follows. Let's say it's raining on Shabbos. So you eat the meal inside the house. Then it stops raining. Do you now need to go and eat in the sukkah? According to the Chachamim, no. Meal mitzad Shabbos. Mitzad sukkahs, there's no mitzvah to eat in the sukkah. According to Rabbi Lezer, let's say it was raining and you ate inside the house. Now Rabbi Lezer holds you have to eat 14 meals in the sukkah. So now you have to go afterwards and eat again in the sukkah because you have to eat 14 meals in the sukkah. I mean, so this is basically answering that the halacha is that you have to eat a meal is only because of Shabbos and Yom Tov, not because of Sukkos. And an nafkamina would be in a situation where you, let's say, for example, there's another nafkamina, let's say a person's fasting because of called Tanis Chalom. Tanis Chalom is the only Tanis one's allowed to have on Shabbos. Person had a nightmare dream and it makes him happy to fast, especially halacha. If a person's happier fasting than eating, let's say had a particularly upsetting dream, then the halacha is allowed to fast on Shabbos. It's the only occurrence where a person's allowed to fast on Shabbos. In such a situation, so therefore he doesn't need to eat in the sukkah because inside Shabbos is allowed to fast. And inside sukkah, we hold like the chachamim that you don't need to. But according to Rabbi Lezer, that you have to eat 14 meals in the sukkah, you'd have to eat in the sukkah. The exception is the first night sukkah. First night sukkah, even if it's raining, let's say it's raining, and you eat in the house, and then it stops raining, then you have to go outside into the sukkah and eat another meal. So this chiddush of Rabbi Lezer, we have to have 14 meals, we don't pass it. Another chiddush. Person never ate the first night sukkahs or any night sukkahs. If a person missed out one of the 14 meals on sukkahs, he can fill it up by eating it on Shmini Atzeres. And since he can fill it up by eating Shmini Atzeres, therefore be filling in this 14 meals. You can't on Shmini Atzeres fill up the mitzvah of eating on the sukkah. About this it says, this is a loss which is forever, and one can never recoup it, never get it back. And therefore, if a person didn't eat in the sukkah, he can't say, I eat on Shmini Atzeres. That doesn't help. So now we're going to examine the svars of the Chavlez and the Chachamim God in the first argument by eating 14 meals. My Talmud Rabbi Lezer, Teshu Ken Dodu, you should sit like you live. Just like living is one in the day and one in the night. Just like when you eat it at home, you have generally in those days every day 2 meals a day. So also on Sukkot, you have to have 2 meals a day in the Sukkah. Rabbanon Kedir, like Kedir. If you want to eat, you can eat. If you don't want, you don't eat. So Rabbi Lezer says, like a house, you eat 2 meals a day, you have to eat 2 meals a day in the Sukkah. The Chachamim say, no, 1 in the morning. If you want to eat, eat. If you don't want to eat, don't eat. Just like sometimes persons need to eat at home either. If Chachamim hold this up to you, the first night Sukkah as well, you shouldn't eat in the Sukkah. It's Shara from Pesach to Sukkot. Both of them it says 15th. Both Sukkot and Pesach is on the 15th of the month. Just like first night Pesach, you have to eat matzah the first night. After that, it's up to you. Also on Sukkot's first night, it's the chayva, the rest of it is rishus. Also, we know on how do we know them. This drasha is actually, the Gemara is only quoting a small portion of it. The truth of the matter is, there's a much longer drasha. The drasha is basically like this. The Torah says in one place that you have to eat matzah for 7 days. 7 days you should eat matzahs. Another place, actually, this week's parasha, it says you should eat matzahs for 6 days. So we've got a problem. One place says 7 days, and one place in this week's parasha says 6 days. How can you reconcile? Answer. The Torah is telling you that on the 7th day, you don't have to eat matzah. You're not allowed to eat chametz. You can't eat bread. But if you don't eat matzah, for example, you just want to eat apples or potatoes, that's okay. And we have a principle, something which is in the rule and came out of the rule, teaches about the whole rule. And we say like this. The 7th day of Pesach was within the rule of 7 days eating matzahs. It came out of the rule to tell us that you don't have to. The main thing is you don't eat chametz. It doesn't just reflect regarding its own day, but it reflects regarding all 7 days, that all 7 days you're permitted to eat matzah, you're not obligated to eat matzah. But the first night Pesach, it says, at night you should eat matzahs. And therefore, since the Torah says, therefore the Torah is teaching us that the first night Pesach, you have to eat matzah. With the rest of Pesach, you can choose not to eat matzah just as long as you don't eat chametz. First night Pesach, you have to eat matzah. And we do exer shava from Pesach to Sukkot. Just like on Pesach, the first night, you have to eat matzah. So too on Sukkot, the first night, you have to eat in the Sukkah. The Achronim ask a following question. It's a very interesting question, one which you can talk about around the table. Why is it that on Pesach, if we eat matzah any other day except the first night, we do not make a broch al achilas matzah? We don't make a broch al achilas matzah. On Sukkot, every time we eat in the Sukkah, we make a special bracha leisha b'sukkah. So why is it that we make a special bracha leisha b'sukkah? We just said that Pesach and Sukkot are the same. Well, in what way? First day Pesach, you have to eat matzah. The rest of Pesach, you can choose what you want. First night Sukkot, you have to eat in the Sukkah. The rest of Sukkot, you can choose what you want. So why regarding Sukkot do we make a special bracha leisha, and regarding matzah we do not? This is a very typical question which many of the Achronim discuss. The simplest answer is as follows. When a person eats matzah, he's not showing he's doing a mitzvah, because it could be that he's hungry and he doesn't fancy eating potatoes, he wants to eat bread, and the only bread available to him is the matzah, he's not allowed to eat chametz. Now, shaken on Sukkot, the fact that he's eating the Sukkah, that's an extra mitzvah. Let's say he's hungry, so he could eat bread out of the Sukkah, but he's choosing to eat it in the Sukkah. The act of going into the Sukkah to eat on Sukkot is a much more clearly defined mitzvah than the act of eating matzah on Pesach. I'm not spend too long about this, but you have to just be aware of the question, because the interesting question is much. Rabbi Steinberg got a nice to about this, but I don't want to bring up the question. Like this, you must remember, Pesach and Sukkot is the same. Pesach, you have to eat matzah first night. Sukkot, you have to eat Sukkot first night. The rest of Pesach and Sukkot, you can do what you want, as long as you don't eat chametz or you don't eat bread out of the Sukkah. One should also be aware that because of that, if it's raining the first night Sukkot, one has to wait much longer until a person eventually eats because of the mitzvah to eat in the Sukkah. So that was the first argument of Rabbi Lezer, which was that he holds you have to eat 14 meals. We pass you only need to eat one. What did Rabbi Lezer? Another thing Rabbi Lezer said. That what? Well, that you have to, that you can be mashlim on Shmini Atzeres. A person has to eat 14 meals in the sukkah. One in the day, one in the night. That means like this. The way Rashi explains, every meal on sukkah you eat, you have to eat it in the sukkah, and you have to eat 14 meals. Furthermore, if that's the case, how can you say that you can be mashlim on Shmini Atzeres? So if you're over Baal Tosef, Omar Beyo, Omar Ami Chosab Abeleza was chosef from his original halacha that you have to eat 14 minutes. The Rishonim discuss did he was a chosef completely or not. But the Abeleza says 2 halachas. You have to eat 40 meals in the sukkah, and you can mash them on Shmini Atzeres for sukkahs. The more asks the problem is a bit about Tosef when you eat in Shmini Atzeres in the sukkah. The more says Abeleza was chosef about the 14 meals. So they say, the Gemara says, Mashlim b'mai, how will you be mashlim on Shmini Atzeres? Ilim b'vifta, you eat bread. So if you eat bread on Shmini Atzeres, you're just doing the mitzvah of Shmini Atzeres. And yashlim b'nei targimo, you should eat some kind of refreshments. So therefore, according to Rabbi Lezer, on Shmini Atzeres, besides eating bread, one should eat some refreshments to be mashlim for the suda that he missed out on the first night. Tani nami ochim, hishlim b'nei targimo, yotza, if you finish b'nei targimo, you're yotza. Says the Gemara, the manager of Agrippas HaMelech asked Rabbi Lezer, Kigunani, like me, but only eat 1 meal in a day. You have to eat 2 meals a day in the sukkah. Is it okay if I eat only 1 meal on sukkah and that's enough? Every day you indulge yourself in all kinds of delicacies. You can't eat one delicacy for the sake of Hashem. So eat a delicacy. And the way Rashi explains is, when you eat delicacies, it gives you an appetite. So even though you normally only eat 1 meal a day, on Sukkot eat delicacies, which will give you an appetite, and then you're mechuyev to eat 2 meals a day. I have 2 wives, achas b'teveh v'achas b'tzipovi. V'yesh li shtei sukkos, I have 2 sukkos, achas b'teveh v'achas b'tzipovi. Ma'osh eitzim v'sukkah v'sukkah v'potter. Can I go from one sukkah to the next? Is anything wrong going from one sukkah to another? Not. This is another chiddush of Rabbi Lezer, and another one that we do not paskin like. The Rabbi Lezer holds you choose one sukkah, and that's the only sukkah that you're allowed to. You can't go from one sukkah to the next. You've lost the first mitzvah. According to Rabbi Lezer, you have to stick to one sukkah the whole of sukkahs. Can you Rabbi Lezer top of Chozayin and Beis? You're not allowed to go from one sukkah to another. You're not allowed to build a sukkah in Chol HaMoed. This is the 4th chiddush of Rabbi Lezer. First chiddush is you have to eat 14 meals. Second of all, you can eat on Shmini Atzeres, we mashed them for sukkahs. Third, you have to stick to one sukkah the entire sukkahs. And 4th, you're not allowed to build a sukkah in Chol HaMoed. We don't pass like any of these. You're allowed to go from one sukkah to the next. But also in sukkah b'chol HaMoed, you're allowed to build a sukkah in Chol HaMoed. Even Rabbi Lezer, everybody agrees, you built a sukkah before sukkahs, and it fell down, you can build it again in Chol HaMoed. What's the story of Rabbi Lezer? Why can't you do? Why do you have to have one sukkah for the whole sukkahs? Make a sukkah for yourself for 7 days. I say sukkah will shiva kun to Rabbi Lezer. It has to be a sukkah for 7 days, and it has to be the same sukkah. Shiva Yomim tells us it has to be a sukkah for all 7 days. I say sukkah b'chag. Make a sukkah any one of those 7 days. The Torah says chag sukkah starts l'chol shiva yomim. 7 days. It's this week's parasha again, parasha Svei. And the question is, does it mean make a sukkah for the entirety of the 7 days? Or does it mean make a sukkah for any one of the 7 days? If a tali can rebuild it, of course, what would you do? Why should we not? That you're not, that's another one. It's not the same one of the big first ones, it's not 7 days. It's okay. So Rabbi Lezer holds, even if it falls, you're allowed to rebuild it because it's considered to be the same one. You're not yotze somebody else's lulav. Take for yourself. We all know the Arba minim have to be yours. You're not yotze somebody else's sukkah. Make for yourself. This is now the 5th chiddush of Rabbi Lezer, and once again, we do not pass like him. Just summarize. That way, it's very easy to remember. The 5 chidushim of Rabbi Eliezer. You have to eat 14 meals. We say no, only the first night sukkahs. You could be mashlim on Shmini Atzeres, fulfill on Shmini Atzeres that which you missed out on sukkahs. We say no, Shmini Atzeres is its own yom. You have to build the same, you have to stay in the same sukkah for all 7 days. We say no, you can go from one sukkah to the next. You're not allowed to build a sukkah on the Chol HaMoed according to Rabbi Eliezer. We hold yes, you are. And you're not yotze somebody else's sukkahs. Let's say I invite you for a meal on sukkahs. According to Rabbi Eliezer, you're not allowed to eat in my sukkah because it's not your sukkah. Chacham say yes, you can. Even though they said you're not allowed to be yotze somebody else's lulav. You could sit in somebody else's sukkah. We're going to have this drasha a number of times. The Torah says, all the citizens of Klal Yisrael shall sit in the sukkahs, which is a bit of a strange pasuk. The Torah does not say all the citizens of Klal Yisrael shall say Shema. Why does the pasuk need to tell us this? The pasuk is telling us that the whole of Klal Yisrael, theoretically speaking, can sit in one sukkah. Now, if everybody sat in one sukkah, obviously some people will not be sitting in their own sukkah. The Rishonim asked the question, maybe we'll talk about a sukkah which is built as a partnership. So everybody is actually sitting in their own sukkah. And the answer, because the sukkah is not worth that much. And if they all had a partnership, they would all own less than the Shava Putta. Less than the Shava Putta is not considered an ownership. So once again, everybody has not actually got an ownership in the sukkah. So the Ma'aseh, they learn from the fact that it says, sukkah is that all of Klal Yisrael can sit in sukkah, is that the whole of Klal Yisrael can sit in one sukkah. And since everybody has even a tiny minor part of it, if it's less than Shava Putta, so it's not considered an ownership. So you can see that you can sit in the sukkah, which is not yours. Oh, so what did the dash would lecho? You can't sit in the sukkah which is stolen. You're not allowed to sit in a stolen sukkah. But borrowed you can. So if, let's say, you steal my sukkah and you build it in your garden, that's no good. But to borrow my sukkah, that's fine. Rabbi Eliezer, this guy in time, this guy in time. If a person becomes a ger during Chol HaMoed sukkahs, or if a child becomes bar mitzvah during Chol HaMoed sukkahs, the pasuk is teaching us that he's chayav in sukkah. You don't need the pasuk. I mean, let's get this very clear. We had 5 chidushim of Rabbi Eliezer. One of them is you can't build a sukkah on Chol HaMoed. The Chachamim say yes, you can. Another one is, can a person sit in a borrowed sukkah? The Gemara now ties these two arguments together. The Torah says, all the citizens of Klal Yisrael should sit in a sukkah. According to Rabbi Eliezer, the chiddush is that a gay or a child that becomes bar mitzvah can sit in the sukkah, even though he became bar mitzvah only in the middle. Says the Gemara, that's only according to Rabbi Eliezer you need that chiddush, because he holds that you have to build the sukkah before sukkahs. And this child, this gay, before sukkahs wasn't chayav. He only became chayav in sukkahs in the middle of sukkahs. So Rabbi Eliezer needs a special pasuk to teach you that nevertheless they are mechuyev in sukkah. But according to the Chachamim, that every single day of sukkahs is its own cheshbon, and you can build your own sukkah every day of Chol HaMoed. So they don't need a pasuk to tell you that kol ezach v'yisol yeshu v'sukkos, that it's referring to a child that became bar mitzvah or begesh in this guy. Because it's obvious that you can go in the sukkah. Why shouldn't he? You're allowed to build your own sukkah, the Chol HaMoed. Of course, you can join up even if you come a mitzvah in the middle of sukkahs. So they use the word kol ezach yeshu v'sukkos to tell you that the whole of Klal Yisrael can sit in one sukkah. If the whole of Klal Yisrael can sit in one sukkah, obviously you can sit in a borrowed sukkah. So the question of what to do with words kol ezach is dependent on what, if a person is allowed to have a sukkah in the middle of sukkahs. Again, we're going to finish now with this topic. We're going to now talk about Rabbi Eliezer. But the 5 things for Rabbi Eliezer is b'chadash: 14 meals of sukkahs, Shmini Atzeres can be mashlim. You cannot build a sukkah on Chol HaMoed. You have to stick to the same sukkah the entire 7 days, and you're not allowed to sit in a borrowed sukkah. We don't pass like any of this. He went to visit his Rebbe on Yom Tov. Are you not somebody who sits at home? I praise the lazy people on Yom Tov. There's a mitzvah to rejoice to one's family. And if a person goes away for Yom Tov, he's not rejoicing with his family. As a very side issue, when the Hasidim started going to the Rebbe for Tish and for Yom Tov, there were many people that argued from this Gemara. The Gemara says clearly that one should spend Yom Tov with his family. Is that so? V'ma bisrim nein shchayv adrak b'dei Abba b'regel. Yom chut v'sit tziveh b'yom tov. Shneim amadua to elech say lo b'yom lo yichodesh lo Shabbos. Bichlal to b'chodesh Shabbos b'chayv nishlik b'lei api Rabbi. There's a special mitzvah to come visit tziveh b'yom tov. So I have a contradiction. On the one hand, Rabbi Lezer says better to stay at home and to be with your family. On the other hand, he says it's a mitzvah to go and visit your Rebbe. It depends if a person can come home that day or not. If a person can come home and be with his wife and family for that night, so then it's good to go to visit your Rebbe. But if going to your Rebbe means that you're going to go out of town and you're not going to be back that day, then you shouldn't go and visit your Rebbe. He was in a Succca, he was in the hut of Rabbi Yochanan, Rabbi Eloi in Kisai. Rabbi Eloi in Kisai, and someone was Kisai. The sun started shining in. So Rabbi Yochanan, the Talmud of Rabbi Lezer said to him, can I put a sheet over the Succca? The question over here was not to do with the fact of making the schach possible. It was to do with that the sunlight was disturbing, it was too hot. So he wanted on Yom Tov or Shabbos, as we'll see in a minute, to erect a partition to stop the sun from going in. Now the problem is, it's building on Shabbos or Yom Tov, which is forbidden generally. But since all he wanted to do was spread a sheet, he wanted to know if that's permitted. Is it okay to spread a sheet in order to make a partition to protect from the sun? Now Rabbi Lezer had the principle that he never answered a question unless he heard that exact answer from his Rebbe. And he hadn't heard his Rebbe ever discuss it. So because of that, he did not want to reply. So Rabbi Yochanan said to his Rebbe, can I spread a sheet? So in order to evade the question, he said to him another thing. Every single Shevet in Klal Yisrael produced one of the leaders, one of the Shoftim. Rashi goes through them in Rashi. Yeshua comes from Ephraim, Ehud from Binyamin, Gideon from Manasseh, that's already got Yisroel, Shimshon from Dan, Barak from Naphtali, that's Bilah, Ibsan is from Yehuda, Eli is from Levi, Tova from Yisachar, Elon from Zvulun, and then there was a few more, Sneer, Yiftach, Shamga, and Yoel, and Abdin, that I don't know which Shevet. So what happened was, he said every single Shevet produced a Shevet. The sun started really beating in halfway into the Sukkah. He asked him again, can I spread a sheet to protect us from the sun? Every single Shevet produced Nevi'im. And they even produced kings. The sun actually now was not just halfway, it actually went all the way into the Sukkah. Not a Richen sudden appearance. So Richen got fed up. He found the sun too much, and he spread a sheet over the Sukkah to protect from the sun. Here, Rabbi Lezer spread his talis over his shoulders, and he walked out. Not because he was trying to avoid it. He never wanted to answer something which he never heard from his Rebbe. How could Rabbi Lezer walk out of the Sukkah? How could he even go to the Sukkah? Rabbi Lezer, one of the 5 chidushim of Rabbi Lezer is you have to stick to the same Sukkah all the Yom Tov. Rabbi Lezer, in the Sukkah. You're not allowed to go from one Sukkah to another Sukkah. That's more begel achavoy. It wasn't Sukkah, let's say it was Pesach. And the reason he was sitting in the Sukkah, says Rashi, was not because of the mitzvah of Sukkahs. He was sitting in the Sukkah because it was hot indoors, so they sat outdoors in the Sukkah. There's still a problem. You're not allowed to leave your home on Yom Tov. So Rabbi Lezer couldn't leave his home, not because of Sukkahs, because he's not going from one Sukkah to another, and not because of your Pesach, because you're not allowed to leave your home on Pesach. That's what Shabbos Haboy. It was Shabbos, it wasn't Yom Tov. What was the question over here? Spreading a sheet to protect from the sun. But Rabbi Lezer clearly holds that's forbidden. So why did Rabbi Lezer avoid the question? Why did Rabbi Lezer not just say to him, it's also Kachachalon? Kachachalon is basically a wooden board, which was like a shutter, which a person wants to sometimes, if there's cold or if it's too much sunshine, he wants to block up the window with a board. It's a bit like in Beis Yisroel, between there's a Snoshim and the Beis Medrash, they have these wooden boards where they put them in to be able to block the noise from one to the other. Now, generally speaking, that would be permitted. Here we're talking about one which wasn't designated for it. And the question is, can you put it on Shabbos? Because it's a formal building. So Rabbi Lezer says, if the board is tied to the frame, the talu, and it's not on the floor, but it's hanging in the air, so it's shown that it's a set for the window, poking boy allowed to block with it. Poking boy, if not allowed to. Either way, you're allowed to use it as a blockage. So you see that Rabbi Lezer holds, you're not allowed to. So why, when Rabbi Lezer was being asked by Rabbi Yechon on his Talmud, can I cover the sukkah with a sheet? Every time he avoided the question, Rabbi Lezer clearly says it's forbidden. Answer more top of the page. There you leave it for a long term. But over here that you don't leave it for a long time, not. And since he did not leave it there for a long time, so therefore it's permitted. That means he wasn't sure if it was permitted, and therefore the question was fine. So therefore that's why he didn't want to answer. Now I want to do the Gemara to the Mishnah, an unbelievable Gemara about the greatness of Rabbi Lezer. He spent a Shabbos in the Galil. They asked him 30 questions on the Succca. This is the halacha that I heard. 18, he said, I never heard the answer. 18, he knew. 12, he said, I never heard. Do you only repeat things that you've heard? You can never answer on your own accord. Why don't you sit and learn properly? That's what the Mashal explains. And then answer the question. Why do you always have to repeat from your Rebbe? He said to them, you're mocking me. You're mocking me that you think that I don't know properly. Now I'll tell you something that I never heard from my Rebbes. And now Rabbi Lezer details a little bit of his life in order they should appreciate that the reason he didn't reply something from his own accord was not for lack of diligence, not for lack of learning, but simply because they felt it was wrong. In all my life, I was always the first person to get to the Beis Medrash. This is what Rabbi Lezer says about his life, that he should appreciate who he was, and that even so he didn't answer on his own accord. So he was always the first person to Beis Medrash. I never slept to Beis Medrash, not a fixed sleep, not a temporary sleep. I was always the last person out. I never left the Beis Medrash when somebody's there. Rabbi Lezer was always the very first person and always the very last person in the Beis Medrash. I never in my entire life ever spoke words which were not Torah. I never said anything which my Rabbi never said. He never talked any sichas chulin his whole lifetime. He never walked 4 hours without learning Torah and wearing tefillin. Nobody ever gets to Beis Medrash before him. He never stepped to Beis Medrash, not a fixed sleep, not a temporary sleep. He never thought in learning in a dirty place. He never left the Beis Medrash or somebody else there. Nobody ever saw him doing nothing. He was always learning. Nobody ever opened the door for his talmidim. He was always the one to open the door for his talmidim. He never repeated anything, never heard from his Rebbe. He never said it's time to stop learning. Except for Pesach and Yom Kippur. On the Pesach and Yom Kippur were the only 2 days in the year where he would tell his talmidim it's time to stop learning. On the Pesach, there's a few explanations in the Rishonim. Some say because of the mitzvah of Korban Pesach, he lived in town. Others say because he wanted that the fathers should put the children to bed in order that the children should be awake for the Seder night. And Yom Kippur would tell them to leave the Beis Medrash because it's a mitzvah to eat on Yom Kippur. And he didn't want them to learn all day and not be mekayim the mitzvah of eating on Yom Kippur. Rabbi Lezer is Talmud of Yehuda Steinberg behaved the same as Yehuda Steinberg. Hillel Zaken had 80 Talmidim. 30 of them deserved to get Ashras HaShechina like Moshe Rabbeinu. They were not zeichet to it because the generation were not deserving. 30 of them were not as great. But they were as great as the Yisroel bin Nun that they deserved that they should be able to stop the sun. As you'll know, that Yeshua in one of the battles, he said, Shemesh begiboin doim v'yoreach be'emek hayolim. That Yeshua told the sun and the moon to stop moving. The more elsewhere says it was Erev Shabbos. He wanted to finish the battle, plenty of time for Shabbos. So for about 24 hours or 30 hours, may the sun and the moon stop moving in order that they should be able to continue the battle. So the sun should stop like Yeshua. Esim Benini. He had 20 in between Moshe and Yeshua. God should be the greatest is innocent, but the Zia was innocent in Zia. Cotton should be the smallest of Hill's Talmidim was Rabbi ben Zakkai. The Mashor and the Kesef Mishnah and others asked the question: if Rabbi ben Zakkai was the smallest of Hill's Talmidim, how could it be that Rabbi ben Zakkai was one who took over as the leader? He was the smallest of them all. How could he take over as leader? It's a very difficult question. The Kesef Mishnah says perhaps he was smallest in knowledge, but greatest in Yiras Shamayim, which is a very interesting answer. This is what they said about Rabbi ben Zakkai. He never left. Mikvah, that's Chumash, Tanakh. Mishnahs or Mishnayos. Talmud. Talmud can't be translated as Gemara because the Gemara came hundreds of years later after Rabbi ben Zakkai. The Gemara over here means, in a sense, all the questions and answers which we have in our Gemara discussing the Mishnayos, Rabbi ben Zakkai knew it. Halachas, he knew all the halachas, Agadas, he knew all the Agadata. Diktukei Torah, he understood every single letter of the Torah, why there was an extra letter or missing a letter. But Diktukei Seifim, Rashi explains it's all the takonos with Rabbanon, which Chazal medactic to keep people away from Averos. Kalim v'chamuim, he knew every single kal v'chomer. V'gzeo shavos, he knew every gzeo shava. Kufos, he knew everything about the way the sun and the moon move around. That means that the kufos referring is to the solar cycle, the cycles of the moon, the cycles of the stars, etc. The gematrias, Rabbi ben Zakkai knew all the gematrias. Sichas Malachei Hashoros. Rabbi ben Zakkai knew all the conversations of Malachim. The Sichas Sheidim, he knew all the conversations of the Sheidim. That way he was able to control them. The Sichas Dekolim, he could understand the speech made by trees. Mesholis Kovsim, Mesholis Shualim, all the Mesholim which were said by washer people and foxes. These were divrei musa that people used to say to encourage simple people to do mitzvahs. Dover God over Dover Cotton, big things and small things, more explains. Dover God over Ma'asim Merkava, he knew Ma'asim Merkava. Dover Cotton Aboyes Abai V'Rova. He knew all the arguments of Abai V'Rova. Even though Abai V'Rova came hundreds of years later. But what happened was Rabbi ben Zakkai knew every question Abai V'Rova were ever going to ask, and he knew the answers. Only over years it was forgotten, and Abai V'Rova had to ask the questions again. But Rabbi ben Zakkai knew it all. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu has got what to fill the storehouses. Must remember, this is Rabbi ben Zakkai. That Rabbi ben Zakkai knew the conversations of Malachim, the conversations of trees. He knew every big thing, every small thing Abai V'Rova. He knew every Gemara, Mishnah, Chumash, and every Moshel. And he was the smallest of the Talmidim. What was so special about Rabbi Yisroel? Any bird that flew over Yisroel would get burnt because he had such fire when you learned Torah that the fire would go all the way to Shemayim, and if a bird would fly over, it would be burnt to death. So Tosfos says, why would there be a fire every time he would learn? Since when Hashem gave us the Torah, he gave it to us through fire. And when Yisroel Nazir would learn it, he would bring back that same feeling and the same ruchnius that existed at Har Sinai, so he reproduced that fire. And Tosfos brings the story, that there was one such a story that Rabbi Lezer were learning and a fire came down. I just want to say a couple of things. I mean, this Gemara is the most unbelievable Gemara a person can possibly imagine. But the Rambam writes in Hilchos Yesod that even though the Gemara over here says that big things is Ma'asim Merkava and small things is the halachas, the questions of Abai V'Rova, a person should know that learning the halachas of Abai V'Rova is greater, more important than learning Ma'asim Merkava. So we shouldn't all jump into learning Ma'asim Merkava. Rambam writes that the ikar greatness of a person is dependent on learning the halachas of Abai V'Rova. That's number one. And number two, there's a word from Shach, a very famous word, and it's a subtle word, but it's a very, very important point. He asks the question, how can the Gemara possibly call the discussions of a Bible of a double cotton small? Simple explanation is compared to Ma'aser Merkava, this is small. But the question still stands, that Bible's arguments, that is our life. How can you call it something small? And he gave this marshal, it's a very sadistic marshal. Imagine that there's a person who's a big Baal Chesed. And one day he's walking past the river and he sees somebody drowning, and he jumps in and saves their life. And a few hours later, somebody knocks on the door and he says, I need money to go on holiday. Please, can you give me some money to go on holiday? And he gives the money. Which one would you consider big and which one would you consider small? Which act was that? Big act of kindness, and which was a small act of kindness? A foolish person would say a big act of kindness, that shows big Baal Chesed is saving their life. A small act of kindness is giving money for the holiday. That's not true. Because saving a life, every person wants to save lives. That's everybody sees it. Somebody about to drown. Of course, you save a person's life. Who would you let drown in front of your eyes? To give money for a holiday? Who needs money for a holiday? That is something which is relatively difficult because it's a luxury. The greatness of a person is when he's able to do chesed, even when it's for something which is not absolutely necessary. So we got the act of kindness of saving a person's life is a much greater act of kindness. But it doesn't prove the chesed, it doesn't prove the kindness of the person who did it as much as the one who gives chesed and helps the person to go on holiday. If you help somebody go on holiday, that is a big act of kindness. Saving a person's life is easy. It says of Shach that learning the halachas of Bible is a double cotton. Since a person can't possibly live without learning the halachas of Bible, so therefore it's something small. It's your life. If it's your life, so it's obviously you're going to do it. So it doesn't show greatness. But Ma'aser Merkava, a person can live without knowing Ma'aser Merkava. And therefore, if a person learns that as well, that shows an extra greatness. What Shach does is he inverts the logic in order to show you that the reason why Bible is considered small is only because it's so important, because it's a person's life. That's why it's considered small, because you need it to live. Okay, Mitzvah Shem, we started for the Mishnah. Unfortunately, I cannot say when. It's a very, very, very busy time at the moment. In Mitzvah, as I said, but in Mitzvah, at the end of the week, things will be much calmer. Hatzlacha with everything. Any questions, welcome to ask.